Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Sarah Gergel, and I'm with the Living Archives Project, where we are collecting stories of how COVID-19 impacted various communities in Charlotte-Mecklenburg County. Today is May 1st, 2023, and this week there were 55 reported cases of COVID-19 in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg County area, which actually shows a 43% decrease over the last 2 weeks. Therefore, each subject is comfortable not wearing a mask. Rebecca, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Rebecca LaClaire, and I am an enrolled member of the Lumbee tribe. I am the Executive Director of Metro Carolina Native American Association, and I'm a Commissioner for the North Carolina American Indian Heritage Commission and the Commission of Indian Affairs.
Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you. It's a lot of work.
A lot of work, a lot of titles. Would you be able to briefly describe your physical image?
Yes, so I am indigenous, so my skin complexion is a little bit darker. I have long hair that is turning gray. So my hair is a mixture of silver and black. And my complexion is just darker skin tone.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
So Rebecca, can you tell me, how long have you been in Charlotte?
So I've been in Charlotte, if I'm not mistaken, since 2013. I go by my daughter's birth, so she's 15. So
Okay.
well, she's about to turn 15. So it's been ever since 2013, I think it is.
That's
maybe
amazing.
no, 13 years.
Okay.
13 years. So yeah, I had to keep up with it all. It's been
Yeah.
so long. It's been like a whirlwind, but at least 13 years.
13 years. Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So you've been able to kind of see Charlotte through a lot of transitions.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
I have. It really has changed, especially where I live in the university area. It has changed a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about all the work that you do, because you have so many incredible titles.
So I really probably self-describe myself as sort of like an advocate. I'm passionate about Native affairs. I've been with Metro Carolina. The reason I came to Charlotte was to work for Metro Carolina as their executive director. They went through some transitions which led me to another position with the Catawba Indian Nation. So I worked for them for about 5 years as one of their executive directors. So I've always been involved in some type of Native affairs for a while. So when I left Catawba, I came back to Metro Carolina and was basically their chairperson. And now I'm their executive director.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you had this former role before, right? When you first came?
Yes.
And now you're back in this
Now I'm
role.
back.
And so tell me about that. How does that feel going through a little different roles and different organizations and coming back?
I like to see, I like to make changes, in organizations. Even when I went to Catawba, I helped them make some changes there. And Metro Carolina at one time was a huge powerhouse in the city of Charlotte for an urban organization.
Okay.
And so I would like to see it back to its glory again. So that's the main reason why I wanted to come back to Charlotte, to see it thriving and to help, put a visible face to Indigenous people in Charlotte.
Yeah.
So that's my whole goal.
What do you think changed that made it not as thriving, as you say?
I think all organizations go through some type of leadership issues eventually, so I think that was one of the main reasons. But Metro Carolina is recognized by the governor and the state as one of the 4 Native American urban organizations in the state.
Okay.
So Metro Carolina is one of them. We cover what we call the Metro Carolina area of the state. So Metro Carolina will always be here.
Yeah.
It's just making it more powerful and more stronger
Yes.
to have a better voice.
Yes.
So they will always be up under the governor, up under the Department of Administration, and we're recognized as just like tribes are recognized with the state. That's how the urban organizations are recognized also.
Okay, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So what are some services that Metro Carolina provides for those who don't know?
So we do a lot of advocacy work at the moment. So if anybody needs anything related to Native Americans, we're usually the first person to call.
Okay.
Whether it is putting on a program, whether it's going out into the schools and educating. We have a great partnership with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. They have their Indian Education Program, which is a grant they receive. So we really work with them closely on having programs. Advocacy work is huge with what we're doing. We do a lot of fitness programs, healthy fitness, mental fitness, and everything. So we're just really trying to grow more and do more opportunities, and so connecting Native Americans to other resources. So whether it's income-based, whether it's jobs, we're really big on small business and helping Native Americans become small business owners. So anything that promotes Native Americans, that's really what we're here for.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Can you speak to how large is the Native American community here in Charlotte, and how many people do you serve usually?
So it really fluctuates, but this past year when the census came out, Mecklenburg County had a good demographic of Native Americans here.
Okay.
And I think it all depends on if they're claiming more than one race. That does bring up the demographic. So there was, I think, close to 10,000 Native Americans in the little Metro Charlotte area and surrounding counties.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And how many would you say, how large is the population that you specifically serve with Metrolina?
I would say we probably touch between 200 to 500 people a year. It just all depends on what we're having and what type of event. So, of course, the powwow brings out more people,
Yeah.
But the whole goal is eventually to have Metrolina in a permanent, housing type situation for our office so we can really reach people. Their whole goal now is with our money is to build the capacity to reach more Native Americans in our area.
Gosh. Capacity building is so important.
Yes, it is. It's very important.
Yeah. So can you tell me, for those who don't know, can you tell me what is a powwow?
Yeah, so a powwow is a cultural gathering that Native Americans use to bring and showcase the different dances that Native Americans do. So the history of powwows really isn't the best because it was used as the way for non-natives to sort of entertain, for natives to entertain non-natives.
Really?
Yes. So now it has evolved into a cultural gathering.
Yeah.
So now we use it to showcase our history to non-natives. So anybody's welcome to come to a powwow and everything. There are cultural guidelines, when they're doing competition. It's only for the dancers. But the MCs, they're really, they explain everything that's happening step by step when you come to a powwow. So it's more of a cultural gathering. It's an opportunity for tribes, urban organizations to host it as a fundraiser, to support the efforts that they do for the Native Americans.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a win-win to be able to teach culture, to educate others, and also to bring in sort of income, to the organization and tribes.
That's amazing. How often do powwows happen here in Charlotte?
Here in Charlotte, we have the biggest one every year in September.
Okay.
So it's coming back this year. It's always the fourth weekend in Charlotte. That's usually Metrolina's powwow. Okay. So all the tribes and urban organizations have a date in North Carolina that's their powwow, So that's when September is when we have ours, the end of September.
Okay, that's amazing. Yeah. And so now we're gonna switch gears a little bit towards your story.
Okay.
Before we started this interview, we did an activity together called a hand map. Is there anything from your hand map that you would like to share with us?
I probably shared a lot already because I said I was passionate, which is I'm an advocate.
Yeah.
So that's just I'm just very passionate about Native Americans and Native American affairs, and just helping us be more visible and everything like that. And I have family and friends listed on there, and they know me as that person too. That's amazing. It just all ties in together.
I love that. Can you tell me a little bit, how were you particularly impacted the last 3 years of your life? How did your life change?
So I think I think it changed in a different ways, Personally, I think it changed in different ways, new opportunities opened up for me, business-wise. But then again, the isolation. I think looking back now, if I'd have done things a little bit more different, I probably would have been more active because I did pick up weight and things like that during COVID, So, but culturally, I think it affected a lot of people, culturally wise, because there were no powwows.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no cultural events,
Yeah.
things like that. So I could see how it affected Native Americans a lot that on that aspect, considering there was really no cultural events right at all were being held,
Okay.
which is like abnormal for not to go to a powwow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah, so like 2-3 years, at least 2 years, no powwows. And so,
Wow.
with a lot of tribes, that's their economic development. So that hurt a lot of people and everything. So I think on the culture wise, I think looking back, it hurt a lot of people, it affected us, everybody, especially, when I look at it myself,
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I go to powwows, I go to a lot of cultural events, not just the powwows, but all cultural events, all events for Native Americans were shut down. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit with your community. Are you very communal? Do you gather together often?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then that must have really been impacted with the
yeah.
restrictions of COVID.
It really did. Whether it's here in Charlotte, some of us might gather together, but back at home in the tribal areas, they always have events and things like that. And so all of that was shut down. They might have like drive-through events during COVID.
Okay.
And so that's basically, I think, church. Having church outside that kept the community together, and then having like those drive-through events where they could at least still see people through a window or something, So Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's tough.
It is. It was. It was. I can see how it really affected people mentally. After all of that. Mm-hmm.
So do you feel like once the restrictions were lifted, at least the major restrictions like the gatherings and the isolation, and do you feel like the community was able to bounce back quick, or do you feel like it kind of took some time?
It took some time because even when the restrictions were lifted, most tribal leadership decided to not still gather.
Okay.
So powwows really just started happening at the end of 2022.
Okay.
And started really getting good in 2023.
Okay.
So it took until everything was lifted.
Yeah.
For people to feel better, even when they were saying 10 could gather, 50 could gather, it still wasn't. Tribal leadership wasn't opening up the doors for that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And powwows generally happen outside. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then other gatherings, do those happen outside, or do they kind of just vary?
It just varies.
Yeah.
It just varies. So Native Americans are very religious.
Yeah.
So church is very important. So that was stopped. A lot of churches did open up. Some of them didn't. So it just all depend, on where you attended.
Do churches have to kind of do a virtual system where they did online services versus in person?
Yeah, and a lot of those churches continued their online services to this day. Mm-hmm.
To this day?
Yeah.
They don't offer any in person?
They do offer in person.
Yeah, both?
They offer both. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, you would have thought that maybe the online would have stopped.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these churches did not, especially in the rural areas, they were like, what do you mean I have to preach via Zoom,
I can imagine.
Yeah, so once they got the hang of it, they understood the benefit of it.
Yeah.
And continue to do it. So,
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so Sunday dinners are very important. That's where you go to grandma's and everybody and all the aunts, uncles, cousins come, So those weren't happening, Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about your family, because you did mention that you do have kids.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit, how did COVID impact you and your family?
So I do have my daughter. My son had already graduated high school, but he was in college.
Okay.
My daughter was when did this start? When she started in 6th grade? I think, 6th grade is when they stopped and said, you got now go to home and learn. So she didn't go back in person until the 8th grade.
Okay.
So same middle school, So,
wow.
I think she loved it. You know what I'm
She
saying?
did?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but she's not like the fan of school.
Yeah.
But however, I can see how it affected her social behavior, even when she didn't see it, But the idea of being able to do Zoom classes from the bed, or, outside in the yard, laying on the trampoline, that was like great to her, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But And plus, these kids now are different, Technology keeps them together. Unlike us going to school, we had to go to school to communicate with our friends, So technology kept them together just as much as it does now.
Okay.
That's what I notice from the school behavior, with my daughter, So that's what I noticed with her. My son, he's more on has the voice. He's a political person in the house, so he talked about all of that,
Yeah.
But going to college via Zoom was not for him.
So he was also at home at the time.
Yes, he was at home too.
Okay.
Yes. So me being at home with everybody, 21-year-old, teenager, and my husband, yes, that was nerve-wracking. I thought I would lose my mind. I still remember the day when I had the house to myself. Literally,
gosh.
I think I thought I was going to cut the lips.
Oh my
Yes,
gosh.
yes. So
I can imagine.
yeah, I'm one of those that I love my family, but we all need our time.
Yes.
So being stuck at home with all of them for 2 years, every day, yes. There were times.
It takes a toll.
Yeah, it takes a toll. It really did, And we don't live in a huge home where everybody's like, here's my living room. Where's your living room?
Yeah.
It's nothing like that. So we had to manage. It took a lot. Yeah.
And so was your husband working from home at the time too?
Well, he's in construction.
Okay.
So he was out a lot,
Okay.
but he did travel a lot sometimes for construction, but he was more local and everything, And with him working in people's homes, we were like sanitized.
I know.
Yeah.
Take precaution.
Mm-hmm.
Did he? Yeah. What did that look like for him as a construction?
It was like to him. I think everything was normal to him because he did not get vaccinated.
Okay.
Yeah, he was the only one in the home who didn't get vaccinated. Everybody else did.
Okay.
And I'm a travel agent too, so I own a small business as a travel agent, and I wanted to travel. That was on my mind. I did not want to be stuck at home.
Yeah.
I wanted to see the world, and that took being vaccinated. So that really was a huge impact with me on getting vaccinated.
Yeah.
And my kids, I really let them make that decision.
Yeah.
That was their decision to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
And my son, at first he was against it, and then he eventually decided to get vaccinated. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
I wonder, as a college student, was that something that the college was forceful upon or not really?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. I think it was more of, how politics got involved with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's Native Americans. We're not very trusting of the government. We were one of the last few to really get pushed to get vaccinated, So that was a huge impact. That was a huge impact for me, Did I trust? No, I mean, I stood there for a long time like, should I do this? Should I not?
I can imagine.
So, that was a huge influence with Native Americans on where they get vaccinated, on the trust from the government.
Have you has other Native Americans in your community shared with you about this issue?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm from the Lumbee tribe, which is basically 2 hours away from here.
Okay.
And that's like Robeson County, Hope County, Scotland County, Cumberland County.
Okay.
Robeson County is one of the poorest counties in the state, where the tribe headquarters are located.
Yeah.
And they had one of the biggest numbers of COVID, and you still could not get them to get vaccinated. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And the tribe did a lot of pushing on this, a lot of education and stuff, but the trust.
Yeah.
That's historical and generational trauma that I think a lot of people don't realize. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you, if you're comfortable, would you share a little bit about that history? Because there's a lot to there.
Right. I mean, so let's say, put it in layman's term. Let's talk about Cherokee, for example, Eastern Band.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't realize that 2 hours away was the Trail of Tears. Like, that's where the Trail of Tears started.
Yeah. So
then you're trying to tell Native Americans that you made walk the Trail of Tears. Now trust me with this needle,
Yes.
Can't get any simpler than,
Can't imagine. I really can't imagine.
Right.
That just hits the heart of everything that they've encountered and trauma.
Right.
It's traumatizing.
Right. So Native Americans have put a lot of trust in the government, and then only to be, betrayed.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way,
Yeah.
So then you're telling us that this vaccine is supposed to save us and just to trust you,
Yeah.
when there's so much going on in the news,
Yeah.
conflicting stories.
Yeah.
And so it took people
So
like me,
much.
tribal leaders, people who serve on state boards to go out and educate and to talk about it. But it was even hard for us as tribal leaders to do this.
Yeah. I really
Yeah.
can imagine.
Yeah.
Do you feel that after a while, do you think that a lot of people were able to get vaccinated, or is it still an ongoing struggle?
It's still an ongoing
Yeah.
struggle.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Like my husband, no, I don't even bring it up.
Yeah.
It ain't happening. It's not happening. And I know many people like that who are educated, who are, just like, no, I went this long and I haven't got COVID. Why should I get? And when you're seeing people, it's hard for me to tell a Native American
Yeah.
who doesn't trust the government already, who had it, not saying they don't trust them, but their antennas are up, let's just put it that way, to, hey, go get vaccinated.
Yeah.
And then they're watching other Native Americans get vaccinated and then still get COVID. And then I'm saying, but you need to go get vaccinated.
Yeah.
That's a hard story. That's a hard line to push,
It is. Yeah. As a leader, I cannot imagine the pressure you were feeling too.
Yeah.
Because as you mentioned, like you yourself still had this struggle, and so
Right.
you're juggling your personal struggle, but then also having to be a voice and an advocate for your community.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I served on the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services COVID Task Force.
Okay.
Yes, I was a voice for the Native Americans. So just educating state leaders.
Yeah.
They will say, well, why aren't the Native Americans getting vaccinated? Well, historical and generational trauma,
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that like, serving on that particular committee and being kind of in the middle, right? You're in the middle of the government and your tribe and your community.
It was, I think, a lot of emotions. It was rewarding to have a voice.
Yeah.
It was frustrating at times to educate people, to understand the reason why.
Yeah.
So I think it was good, at least, and plus I had firsthand knowledge of what was happening, that I could go back and tell my community, this is what's about to happen, this is what's going on, and be able to have those resources firsthand to be able to forward over to people.
Yeah. Did you feel heard during that time? Did you feel that your community's needs and struggles were heard, or was that still a struggle?
I think it was a struggle. Yeah, I think it was a struggle. I think it wasn't for, especially in these smaller communities of tribal communities. I definitely don't think their voices were heard. The bigger tribes, let's say, for example, Lumbee and Eastern Band, their voices were heard, and it's a different aspect. I think people don't understand when it comes to state recognized tribes versus federal recognized tribes.
Yeah.
So Eastern Band is, they're like their own little nation, their own little government.
Okay.
And they're treated on the federal side. So they have more income coming in, more resources.
Okay.
All that federal resources is coming in. Unlike the other 7 tribes in North Carolina, the other ones, they're state recognized.
Okay.
So it's just state resources and things like that.
Which is more limited.
More limited, a whole lot limited, So it took partnerships to make those efforts that happen in those tribes happen with COVID.
Yeah.
And the vaccine and everything.
Do you feel like those partnerships were naturally flowing, or was there some work you had to do to get them to?
There was some work.
Yeah.
I think with the Lumbee it's a little bit better because they have UNC Pembroke.
Oh, wow.
So, it's right there in Robinson County, Pembroke. And UNC Pembroke was built to educate Native Americans. It's the reason why it was built.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that's the reason why UNC Pembroke was built by Native Americans to educate Native Americans.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
because
amazing.
because they couldn't go to school anywhere else.
Okay.
So they said, well, let's build this college for our people.
Yeah.
So, and then eventually it became Pembroke College, and then Pembroke State University, and then UNC Pembroke.
Okay.
So with the university being right there with the Lumbee tribe,
Okay.
that partnership was great because they have a school of nursing,
Yeah. Yeah.
Dr. Beasley was very instrumental on doing things and, bringing those partnerships together. But these other rural tribes, that took some effort.
I
Yeah.
can imagine.
Yeah.
How about in Charlotte? How did you feel like in Mecklenburg County in particular?
I think Mecklenburg County, I think it's a little bit different, because we are able to get the resources just like everybody else in the community. So I think in the city area, it was a little bit easier. I think a little bit easier for everybody compared to rural areas.
Yeah.
And so Metro Atlanta received a lot of resources. Being with the commission and the state, that we could order supplies, order sanitizing things.
Yeah.
So we were able to definitely get that out into the community and to our tribal people in Charlotte.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that we definitely went through our struggles, but I think it wasn't as hard as some of these rural areas for the tribes.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
it's a challenge.
With Eastern Band, Catawba, they definitely, had those federal resources coming in, And so in Charlotte, we're made up of urban Native Americans, so you got Native Americans from all over who live in Charlotte. I've met Navajos, I've met Chickahominys, Muskegee.
Wow.
So I've met state-recognized Native Americans, fairly recognized Native Americans. So it all depends on what tribe. If they were fairly recognized, those resources, a lot of resources were there.
Okay.
If they were state-recognized, those were the ones who who needed help from their tribes. And so we were there to make sure that they had those resources.
Yeah. So you were kind of that connection piece, that middle. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, as Metrolina during this time, do you feel like you guys could provide the services needed the last few years despite the restrictions, or did Metrolina have to kind of slow down as well?
I think it's not so much that we slowed down, but I think we're mainly coming out of our own pocket to provide resources.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like traveling to people's homes and leaving things on their doorsteps.
Yeah.
A lot of that came from the little funding that we had, or we did it on our own as a working board.
Okay.
Unlike other minority organizations that received all this funding to help their minority community, Metro Atlanta really didn't receive any of that. They came into the city.
Really?
Yeah. So that's just a downfall, because we're really the only Native American organization in the city of Charlotte. We're the only ones that help Indigenous people, but when it came to funding coming into the city of Charlotte, we didn't receive any of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something, I think it's a two-way street, One, more visibility brings in more money, But then at the other hand, there's not only but so many of us. So our visibility is lower than any other minority, because there's not but so many Native Americans compared to other minorities.
Yeah.
So of course our visibility is going to be lower. And it's hard to be visible without the funding to make you visible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
And at the same time, who are you going to give the Indigenous money to?
Yeah.
Who else are you going to give it to? We're the only ones here.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to give us some of this minority funding to help the Indigenous community?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a struggle. It's a struggle in the city of Charlotte.
Yeah.
Something I'm working hard on, working with, city leaders, county leaders, and let them know, we're here.
Yeah.
Let's work together.
That's so, wow.
Yeah.
I hope you are successful
Right.
in getting more resources
Yeah.
and providing what the community needs.
Right.
Because you are here, as you
Right.
say, and you do make a percentage of this community, and just getting that visibility a little more out there. I hope that you are successful in that.
Yeah. It's a struggle, but I think we will, eventually,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I hope so. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. So just to respect and honor your time, Rebecca, are there any other experiences or stories that you would like to share with us before we finish?
Nothing I can really think of. I think one of the great things that came out of COVID is Even state and tribal leadership were meeting, and discussing things that were happening,
Yeah.
especially virtually.
Yeah.
So technology definitely helped tribal communities. I see that bird coming.
Yes.
So technology really helped tribal communities come together. So at least, with like the North Carolina American Indian Heritage Commission was formed. We got money through the General Assembly for COVID. So I think there's things that's coming through that it really prospered during COVID.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really encouraging.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
And as, someone who is the voice for the local Native American community, is there anything else that you would like to share with us for your community, as on behalf of your community, before we finish?
Nothing. I don't think there's anything I could think of. I think I just would recommend, people want to know more about Native Americans to reach out to us.
Yeah.
We're here. We educate. We do speeches. We go out in the community. We're here.
Yeah.
We're here to definitely educate and be a visible voice in this community.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Okay.
I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.